My wife cheated with her boss and stole $200, $0 from our joint account to fund her affair, then had the audacity to sue me for half our property during the divorce. I never thought betrayal would turn into a courtroom nightmare. Hello everyone. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now, let's begin the video. Using a throwaway for obvious reasons, with certain specifics modified to preserve anonymity. I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this, but here I am, sitting in my living room staring at the bank statements that changed everything. It all started with little signs, strange texts on her phone, late nights at the office that seemed longer than they should be, and her becoming more distant. At first, I brushed it off as work stress or maybe just her needing space. But then I started noticing the little things, her hiding her phone more often, her avoiding eye contact, and the way she'd get defensive when I asked about her whereabouts. I thought I knew her, thought I trusted her, but deep down I knew something was off. It was around 2 weeks ago when I got the first real clue. I was checking our joint bank account, something I did occasionally, mostly to keep tabs on our finances, and I saw a huge withdrawal, $50, $0. I thought maybe it was a mistake, but no, it was legit. The account balance was drained and I couldn't understand where all that money went. I called her that night, and she told me she'd been handling some investments for her boss, a guy named Mark. She claimed it was a risky venture but that she was sure it would pay off. She sounded convincing, but I felt a strange pit in my stomach. Something about her tone wasn't right. Over the next few days, I started digging. I checked her phone records, and that's when I saw the messages, flirty, intimate texts exchanged between her and Mark. It wasn't just professional talk. It was clear they were sleeping together. There were pictures, too. She sent him selfies in lingerie, and he responded with suggestive remarks. I couldn't believe it. The woman I married, the mother of my kids, was cheating on me with her boss, and she was stealing money from us to fund her affair. The betrayal hit me like a punch in the gut. I felt numb, then furious, then hurt. How could she do this? How could she lie so blatantly? I confronted her that night, and her reaction was nothing short of a disaster. I told her I knew everything, the texts, the money, the lies. Her face twisted and she started crying, but not because she was sorry. No, she was angry, defensive, and full of bullshit excuses. She told me she was just talking to Mark about work, that the money was a loan she was going to pay back, that I was overreacting. She called me paranoid, accused me of spying on her, and said I was ruining everything. When I pressed her about the affair, she flat out denied it, even though I had the evidence right in front of me. She said I was imagining things, that I was jealous and insecure. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept staring at the ceiling, replaying everything. I felt betrayed on every level, my trust, my love, my financial security. I was furious that she'd stolen our money to fund her affair, and even more pissed that she was so cavalier about lying to my face. I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. How could she be so cold? How could she lie so effortlessly? I started questioning everything, our marriage, our life together, whether I even knew who she really was. The pain was overwhelming and I didn't know how to process it. I just knew I couldn't keep going like this, not without some form of justice, some way to make her see what she'd done. That's when I decided I had to find out just how much she'd taken. I pulled all the bank records, looked at every transaction, and discovered she stole over $200, $0, our savings, her bonus, money I'd been saving for the kids' college fund. All gone, poured into her affair and her lies. I was stunned. How could she do this? How could she be so reckless with our future? I felt sick. I knew I had to act, but I didn't know what my next move should be. For now, all I could do was sit with the betrayal, trying to figure out how to pick up the pieces. After I uncovered everything, the texts, the bank statements, the stolen money, knew I couldn't just sit around and do nothing. I had to confront her again, but this time I was ready. I didn't want to yell or accuse blindly. I wanted answers, and I wanted to make her understand how deeply she'd hurt me. I also knew I had to think about what to do with all the evidence I had gathered. This wasn't just about catching her cheating. It was about protecting myself financially and emotionally from her lies. So I set up a meeting. I told her I wanted to talk, just the two of us, after she got home from work. When she finally walked through the door that evening, her face was tight, defensive, like she already knew what was coming. I didn't waste time. I laid everything out, showed her the bank statements, the texts, the photos. I watched her reaction closely, expecting her to break down or at least admit something, but instead she just kept lying. She insisted she was innocent, that Mark was just a friend, that the money was her savings, that she was planning to come clean but got scared. She spun a web of bullshit, trying to convince me. She was the victim here. I felt my blood boil. How stupid did she think I was? I told her I knew about the affair, that I saw everything, and that her excuses were pathetic. I told her I was done trusting her, that I was furious she'd stolen so much from us to fund her betrayal. Her face turned red with rage, and she started screaming, calling me paranoid and accusing me of stalking her. She said I was ruining her reputation, that I was overreacting, and that she'd never do anything to hurt her family. I just stared at her, feeling like I was watching a stranger. My wife, the woman I loved, was a liar, a thief, and an adulteress. That confrontation was a turning point. I realized I couldn't keep pretending everything was okay. I told her I was filing for divorce and that I wanted her out of the house. She yelled, begged, even cried, trying to turn it around, saying I was the one at fault, that I was controlling and jealous. But I didn't buy it. I knew her game now. She'd lied so many times I couldn't trust a word she said anymore. I wanted her gone, and I wanted to protect whatever was left of what I thought we had. I also started thinking about the money, how to recover it, how to hold her accountable, maybe even how to take her to court for the theft. The emotional toll hit me hard. I felt betrayed, angry, and exhausted. I'd spent so many years building a life with her, giving her everything, my love, my trust, my hard-earned money, and she'd just thrown it all away for some affair. I kept replaying everything in my head, trying to understand how I missed the signs, how I let myself get blindsided like this. I was devastated, but I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I knew I had to move on, not just for myself, but for my kids too. They deserved stability, not a mother who lied and stole from us. In the days that followed, I started planning my next steps. I contacted a lawyer, gathered all the evidence, and prepared for what would come next. I knew she'd fight me over the property, maybe try to claim she was entitled to half, even though she'd stolen a fortune. I also realized I had to be prepared for her to sue me for custody or try to turn the kids against me, but I was ready. I couldn't let her get away with it, not after everything she'd done. I felt a mixture of anger and relief, anger at her betrayal, but relief that I finally had some clarity and control over my life again. I still felt numb most days, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let her destroy me. I was going to fight for what's mine, my dignity, my money, my future. The pain was real, and it still stings every time I think about what I lost, but I also know that I'll get through this. Somehow I have to. I just wish I had seen the signs earlier, or maybe I wish I'd never trusted her at all. But now I'm focused on rebuilding, learning from this nightmare, and making damn sure she doesn't get away with it. After I made the decision to go ahead with the divorce, everything moved faster than I expected. I contacted a lawyer, a no-nonsense guy named Mike who specialized in family law and financial crimes. I handed him all the evidence I had, screenshots, bank statements, texts, and told him everything I knew about her affair and her theft. Honestly, I felt a weird mixture of relief and rage. Relief that I was finally taking control, and rage that she'd taken so much from us, from me, for her selfish needs. Mike told me I had a solid case, especially since I could prove she stolen over $200, $0 from our joint account. That's a huge amount, enough to cause serious legal trouble if we went that route. But I also knew she'd try to fight me on the property division, claiming she was entitled to half of everything, even though she'd betrayed me and stolen from us. I was prepared for that. I told Mike I wanted full custody of the kids, and I wanted her out of the house immediately. I wasn't about to let her stay there and keep manipulating everything. The day I served her divorce papers was intense. She called me, screaming, crying, accusing me of ruining her life. She said I was a controlling monster, that I was ruining our family, and that I had no right to take the kids away from her. She even tried to spin it as if I was the one cheating, said I'd been unfaithful, that I'd been hiding something. I just listened, knowing she was desperate to turn the tables. I kept my cool and told her the truth. She betrayed me, stole from us, and lied to my face. That's why I was doing this. I told her she'd burned her bridges with me and that I was done playing her game. The courtroom battles started pretty quickly after that. She hired a lawyer too, a slick guy named David who seemed more interested in defending her than in justice. She filed a counterclaim, trying to argue that she was entitled to half of everything, including the house, the savings, and even some of my retirement accounts. She claimed she deserved it because she was entitled, even though I knew she'd stolen from us. It was clear she was trying to manipulate the system, play the victim, and spin her lies to get what she wanted. But I had the evidence and I was ready to fight. Meanwhile, she kept up her act, pretending to be the innocent wife, crying in court, claiming she'd been under so much stress at work that she snapped, that she never meant to hurt me or the kids. She insisted she was the victim, that Mark was just a close friend, and that the money she took was just her savings. She even lied about how she'd planned to pay me back, saying she was going to get a bonus from her boss soon. That was a blatant lie. I knew she'd spent every penny funding her affair, buying herself expensive clothes, and going on trips with Mark. I saw the receipts, the bank transfers, the credit card statements. She thought she could spin her way out of it, but I wasn't buying it. The emotional toll was brutal. Every day I felt like I was walking a tightrope. One moment I was furious, the next I was just exhausted. I couldn't believe she'd do this, betray me, steal from me, and then have the audacity to act innocent. I kept thinking about the family we once had, the trust I'd given her, and how she'd thrown it all away. It was a crushing realization that the woman I married was capable of such deception, and that she'd been so willing to destroy everything for her own selfish pleasure. As the court proceedings dragged on, I started to see how deep her lies ran. She claimed she was the victim, that I was trying to take everything she owned, but the truth was she'd already taken everything from me: our savings, my trust, my peace of mind. I couldn't understand how she could be so callous, so manipulative. Every hearing felt like a new blow, but I remained firm. I knew I had the truth on my side, and I was determined to hold her accountable. I also started thinking about what I'd do if I won, how I'd rebuild my life, protect my kids, and make sure she paid for what she'd done. In the midst of all this chaos, I realized I was also grieving. Not just the loss of my marriage, but the loss of the woman I thought I knew. The woman I loved would lie, cheat, and steal without remorse. It made me question everything: my judgment, my instincts, my ability to trust anyone again. I'd been blindsided, and it hurt more than I could have ever imagined. But I also knew I had to stay strong for me and for my kids. I couldn't let her ruin my future, not after everything she'd destroyed. I started leaning on friends and family, trying to find some semblance of normalcy amid the chaos. Now, I'm just waiting for the final verdict. I want her out of my life, out of my house, and I want justice for what she's done. I don't care about her sob stories anymore. I just want to move on clean, clear, and free from the betrayal that nearly broke me. I still feel the sting of her lies every day, but I'm determined not to let this define me. I've learned that trust is fragile, and sometimes the people closest to you can turn out to be your biggest enemies. All I can do now is hold on to what's left, protect my kids, and make sure she doesn't get away with destroying everything we built together. The court date finally arrived after months of back and forth, and I was ready. I had everything laid out: proof of her affair, the bank statements showing her theft, and all the texts and photos that made her look even worse. I remember walking into that courtroom feeling like I was carrying the weight of everything she'd done. My stomach was tight and my hands trembled slightly, but I kept telling myself I had to stay strong. I had to stand up for myself and for my kids. Her lawyer, David, was slick, full of smooth talk and legal jargon meant to muddy the waters. He tried to argue that she was entitled to half of everything, claiming her contributions, whatever they were, should be considered equal to mine. But I knew the truth. She'd stolen a large chunk of our savings, lied about her relationship with Mark, and had no right to claim half of what I worked for. I had the evidence, and I was prepared to fight for full custody, too. I wanted her out of our lives completely. When it was my turn to speak, I laid everything out calmly but firmly. I told the court about her lies, her theft, her affair, and how she'd betrayed our vows. I showed the bank statements, the texts, the photos, everything. I explained how she'd taken over $200, $0 from our joint account to fund her affair with Mark, how she'd lied about her intentions, and how she'd manipulated both of us. I told the judge I wanted full custody of the kids because I couldn't trust her anymore, not with her history of deception and theft. Her reaction was predictable. She sat there, crying fake tears, trying to look innocent. She claimed she was under so much stress that she didn't mean to hurt anyone, that she was just trying to make a better life for herself. She insisted she loved the kids and that she'd never do anything to hurt them. But her words rang hollow. I knew she was just spinning her story, trying to get sympathy. I also knew the judge saw right through her act. The judge listened carefully, asking questions, scrutinizing the evidence. I could see her lawyer whispering in her ear, trying to suggest she had some right to the property, but I stayed confident. I explained that her theft and lies had broken any trust, and that I was the one who should be awarded full custody in the house. I emphasized that her actions had destabilized the family, and that I wanted to protect the kids from any further damage. After what felt like hours, the judge finally made her ruling. She ordered her to vacate the house within 30 days, awarded me full custody, and ordered her to pay back the stolen money. She also denied her claim to half of the property, citing her misconduct and the betrayal. I felt a strange mix of relief and exhaustion when the verdict was read. It was over, at least in court. But I knew the emotional aftermath was just beginning. Leaving the courtroom, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders, but also a deep sadness. I had fought for everything I believed was right, but I couldn't help feeling the loss of my marriage, the trust I once had in her, and the life we'd planned. I kept thinking about the kids, how they would be affected, how I could shield them from the fallout. I promised myself I'd do everything I could to give them a stable, loving environment, even if it meant rebuilding from nothing. In the days that followed, I started packing her things and preparing for her to leave. It was a strange, surreal experience, seeing her pack up her belongings, knowing she'd betrayed us all. She kept insisting she was the victim, crying, blaming me, saying she'd been under so much pressure at work, but I wasn't buying her act anymore. I'd heard enough lies. I knew her true face now, and I wanted nothing more than to put this nightmare behind me. I also began planning my next steps financially. I had to recover the stolen money, or at least ensure she paid for it. I consulted with my lawyer about filing a civil suit to reclaim the funds, and I started looking into my options for rebuilding my life. I knew it wouldn't be easy, especially with the emotional scars, but I was determined. I just wanted to move on, to find peace again, and to protect my kids from the chaos she'd unleashed. As I watched her move out, I realized how much I'd been blindsided, that I'd trusted her with everything. But I also learned that sometimes, the people closest to you can turn out to be your worst enemies. I've come to accept that I can't change what happened, but I can choose how I move forward. I'm not perfect, and I still have a long road ahead, but I'm starting to see a path toward healing. And honestly, that's the best I can hope for right now. The days after she moved out felt like walking through a fog. I was physically drained, emotionally raw, but I knew I had to keep going. The house was eerily quiet without her. Every corner, every room seemed to echo with memories, some good, most bad now. I kept looking at the empty spaces where her things used to be, trying not to dwell on the betrayal, but it was impossible. I kept replaying everything, the lies, the theft, the affair, and it all felt like a bad dream I couldn't wake up from. My first priority was to get a handle on the financial mess she left behind. I contacted my lawyer again, Mike, to discuss how to recover the stolen money. We started exploring options, filing a civil suit to reclaim the $200, $0 or more she took, and possibly going after her for damages. I knew it was a long shot, but I had to try. I also had to figure out how to protect what was left of our assets. She made a mess of our finances, and I needed to clean it up fast. At the same time, I had to start thinking about the kids. I wanted to shield them from the worst of this chaos, but I knew they sensed something was wrong. I explained to them gently that Mommy was going away for a little while and that everything would be okay. I didn't want to scare them, but I also knew I had to be honest. Age-appropriate honesty, of course. I promised them that I loved them more than anything, and that I'd do everything I could to keep them safe and happy. It broke my heart to see the confusion in their eyes, but I had to stay strong for them. One thing I didn't expect was how much support I'd get from friends and family. I'd always been a private person, but suddenly I found myself leaning on those around me. My brother, Jason, came over almost every evening just to talk, to keep me grounded. My sister, Lisa, helped me organize the house, sort through her things, and offered practical advice. It was humbling to realize how much I'd been carrying alone and how much people genuinely cared. That support gave me a bit of strength when I felt like I was about to collapse. Meanwhile, I also started working on myself, getting therapy, trying to process the betrayal. I realized I'd spent so long trusting blindly, ignoring the red flags, convincing myself everything was fine. Now I had to rebuild that trust in myself. I needed to learn how to spot the warning signs, how to protect myself emotionally, and how to move forward without letting her betrayal define me. It was a painful process, but I knew I had to do it. Every session, every conversation was a step toward healing. As I dug into the legal options, I discovered that she might try to fight me over the property and custody, things I'd expected. She had already started spinning stories to her friends that I was the bad guy, that I'd been controlling and emotionally abusive. It was classic gaslighting, and I knew I had to be prepared. I kept copies of everything, texts, emails, receipts, to counter her lies. I even started journaling daily, documenting everything that happened, just in case I needed to present a timeline in court. I wanted to be ready for whatever she threw at me. One evening, I sat in the backyard, staring at the stars, feeling a strange mixture of exhaustion and hope. I thought about all I'd lost, but also about what I still had, my kids, my integrity, my future. I realized that despite the pain, I was still standing. I'd survived her betrayal, and I was starting to see a way forward. I knew I wouldn't forget what happened, but I could learn from it. I could grow stronger. And I could make sure that, one way or another, she paid for what she'd done. Not just in court, but in every part of her life. I promised myself that I wouldn't let her destroy me. I'd rebuild piece by piece, even if it took years. I'd learn how to trust again, how to love again, but most importantly, I'd learn how to be better, more cautious, more aware, more resilient. I knew that life after betrayal wouldn't be easy, but I was determined to take control. I had to protect my kids and myself from her lies and manipulations. And I would. That's the only way I knew how to survive this nightmare, to keep fighting, keep moving forward, and never let her steal any more of my happiness. The final few months have been a roller coaster, but I've finally reached a point where I can breathe a little easier. The court's decision came through and I got full custody of the kids. She was ordered to pay back the stolen money, though I'm still waiting to see how much of that she'll actually cough up. The house was awarded to me, and her name is no longer on any of the legal documents. It's a relief, but it's also strange. Like I'm living in a house that once belonged to us, but now it's just mine, with her shadow lingering somewhere in the background. Looking back, I realize how much I've learned from this nightmare. Betrayal cuts deep, but it also reveals who people really are. My wife's lies, her theft, her manipulations, those were her true colors. I had to face the harsh truth that I'd been blind for too long, trusting her blindly, ignoring the signs. But I also learned that I am stronger than I thought. Standing in that courtroom, presenting my case, I realized I'd become someone who fights for what's right, someone who refuses to be broken by lies and betrayal. The emotional scars are still there, but they're healing. I've gone to therapy, talked through the pain, and started to rebuild my confidence. My kids are adjusting, and I've made a point to be open with them, to give them stability and love. I want them to grow up knowing that even in the face of betrayal, life can go on. That trust is fragile, but it can be rebuilt, and sometimes you have to cut out the toxic people to protect yourself. As for her, I don't know where she's headed now. I hope she finally learns her lesson, that honesty and integrity matter more than money or fleeting pleasures. I don't harbor hatred, just a deep sense of disappointment. I hope she finds some kind of peace, but I also hope she understands the consequences of her actions. For me, the pain will always be a part of my story, but it no longer defines me. I've learned to stand tall despite everything. Now I'm focusing on the future. I've started saving again, slowly rebuilding my financial stability. I've reconnected with friends I drifted away from, and I've even started dating casually, something I never thought I'd be able to do after all this. I'm not rushing into anything. I just want to enjoy life again, piece by piece. I've realized that happiness isn't about having everything perfect, but about learning to forgive yourself for past mistakes and moving forward with hope. Most importantly, I want anyone out there going through something similar to know this. Betrayal hurts, it devastates, and it changes everything. But it doesn't have to break you. You can survive it. You can rebuild. And sometimes the hardest lessons lead to the strongest growth. I've come out of this a different person, more cautious, yes, but also more resilient. And I know now that I deserve honesty, loyalty, and respect. That's what I'll hold on to as I step into whatever comes next. This chapter is finally closed. I won't forget, but I will move on, stronger than ever.